As an avid reader, one of the most difficult things that I have to do every year is curating my autumn reading list. And if you're anything like me, this is a very serious endeavor, which involves weeks and weeks of research and picking the perfect autumn books to read under an orange tree in October. So to me, when I think of an autumnal book, I think of a book that has really dark and atmospheric vibes, perfect for sitting in a cozy armchair while the wind outside blows blustering cold, beating against the windows. Autumn books are best read accompanied with a cup of tea or coffee, opened on a park bench in spare moments while the air around you grows colder and colder. During autumn, I love to be reading books that accompany this feeling of warmth and an oncoming decay of the world around me. I love reading books that take place in dark old universities or situated in the mountains or the countryside, that involve dark and twisted storylines that are focused on incredible character development and beautiful, lush and vivid language. So if that sounds like the vibe of the books you want to be reading this autumn, you are in the right place. So without further ado, grab a mug of your favorite autumn beverage and join me as I discuss my favorite autumnal books. So for my first autumn book recommendation, I wanted to recommend my absolute favorite book that I've read so far in 2022. Everybody who I've recommended it to has absolutely adored it. And that book is These Violent Delights by Micah Nemerever. These Violent Delights is pretty much the pinnacle of dark academia. It is an incredibly dark novel with so much depth. Throughout the novel, it follows these two boys, Paul and Julian, who are starting college, and they meet each other and they form this really deep, intimate, codependent, and very unhealthy relationship where throughout the book they are trying to prove their love and devotion to each other in very startling and increasingly dark ways. Immediately starting the novel, you find out that a murder has been committed. So throughout the book, you see this devastating descent into madness, what leads them to commit such a violent act. And this book is just so stunningly written. And this may just be my bias, but I have such a personal and close connection to this book because it takes place in Pittsburgh, which is the city that I grew up in. And so being able to really intimately know these locations is just incredible. So I could not recommend this book enough for autumn. The descriptions of the landscape are dark and bleak, and this book would honestly be great for winter as well. I am just obsessed with this book. So the next book that I want to talk about this video is Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. I actually just finished this book in August, and it was my favorite book that I read that month. I've been meaning to read this book for such a long time because in one of my classes freshman year of college, the author actually came and did a Zoom call with my class, which was just incredible. I didn't know this until very recently, but Carmen Maria Machado went to American University, which is where I am currently enrolled at college, and that was just a really fun fact to learn. But back to the book itself, Her Body and Other Parties is a collection of short stories that really zero in on the female experience and all of the dark complexities that come along with womanhood. I truly can't pick a favorite story out of this collection. They are all so brilliant, and there were points where I was just moved to tears. Machado's writing is just entrancing, and it just pulls you in and makes you feel every emotion that these characters are feeling. And even though they're short stories and the storylines aren't as fleshed out as they would be in a novel, it really feels like you are reading a novel in that way, even if these stories are just snapshots of things that are happening. The emotions just pull you in so deep. But this book is just so wonderful, and you need to be reading it this fall. So the next book that I have for you is actually a really popular book on Book Talk right now, and that is Bunny by Mona Awad. So going into this book, I was really unsure. I didn't know if it was gonna be for me, but one of my really good friends recommended this book to me, and so I picked it up and read it, and I was just blown away by this book. I'm sure you're familiar with it already since you see it in a lot of dark academia book recommendation lists, and that's for a good reason. This book is just so incredible. So Bunny takes place at a fictional college following a girl as she gets indoctrinated into this cult of women. As you follow along the character, you see how she is just pulled into this environment, and the plot is just so bizarre that going too far into it would just give it all away. But if there's one way that I would describe this book, it would be completely and utterly unnerving. This book does such an expert job at diving into your psyche, making you feel so uncomfortable and disturbed. And I don't think I've ever read a book quite like this, where it just completely alters the way that I'm feeling. Most of the time I can go into a book and be absorbed in a book, but this book impacted me emotionally in such a strange way. And I think this book would be really great to read in the fall because the way that it manipulates your emotions and puts you in such a dark mindset. But this novel is truly unlike anything that I've read before. So I think if you're into reading dark academia novels that really go into human relationships and that really dives deep into the human psyche, I think this one is definitely for you. Now I would like to introduce you to one of my favorite books of all time, and that is Morris by E.M. Forster. I think I want to begin talking about this one by saying that when I read it, it completely altered my brain chemistry. I think the blurb on the back does a really good job at describing this book, so I will read it to you. Morris is set in the elegant Edwardian world of Cambridge undergraduate life. This story by a master novelist introduces us to Morris Hall when he is 14. We follow him through public school in Cambridge and into his father's firm. In a highly structured society, Morris is a conventional young man in almost every way, except that he is homosexual. This book is just so beautiful, poignant, and incredibly written, and it just broke my heart when I read it. This book also would fall into the dark academia subgenre since it takes place at Cambridge in Edwardian England. And I just think that this is a great book for fall just because I love reading books that are really centered around a specific character. This book is an excellent character study on the main character, Morris. You end up feeling so connected to him as you follow along his story and all the things that he goes through as a gay man back in the early 20th century. But one very profound thing about this book that I want to point out is that it does have a happy ending, which most books of this nature at the time did not. So this book is very revolutionary in that way. So just to show how beautiful the writing of this novel is, I'm going to read you a short passage. I should have gone through life half awake if you'd had the decency to leave me alone. Awake intellectually, yes, and emotionally in a way. But here, he pointed with his pipe stem to his heart, and both smiled. Perhaps we woke up one another. I like to think of it anyway. So if you love a book that takes place in a university setting and is a really excellent character study, then I think this one's perfect for you, and this is a great read for the upcoming colder months. Next, I want to discuss Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. So I read this book last winter, and when I tell you that I could not put it down as soon as I bought it, it was a very spontaneous way that I discovered this book. I was just chatting to a Barnes & Noble employee and they'd ended up recommending it to me, and I went home, I read the first chapter, and I ended up reading the entire thing in one sitting. It was just the perfect book for a cold winter day, and I think this book would be incredible in October, November as well. I wouldn't exactly describe this book as a fantasy, but it absolutely has some very magical and fantastical elements in the book that are very strongly present. This book is also a very unconventional dark academia book. I really love this book because you don't exactly know where the setting is at first, but the setting is just this gorgeous, sprawling marble halls with stone statues situated everywhere, and it follows the story of this one man trying to figure out what this place is and what his place in the world is. In a way, this book is also a mystery. Throughout the book, it just uncovers layers and layers of this really beautifully thick and intricate plot that reveals itself in the most beautiful and incredible way. I think if there was an award for a book with the most beautiful setting, I think it would have to go to Piranesi. I don't have my copy with me. I think that's the case with a lot of the books that I'm recommending here since I'm currently at university. But nonetheless, my copy is just sprawled in notes, and it is just, I think, the perfect immersive dark academia book for fall. And I think if you love books that have a really unique and beautiful setting, I think Piranesi is going to be perfect for you. Next, we have a book series that is very popular, but I hold it very near and dear to my heart, and that is The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. I'm sure you've heard of this series a million times, and this is just going to be me trying to convince you to read it if you have not yet. So The Raven Boys is a gorgeous series situated in the American Appalachian Mountains, and it is about a group of teenagers who are on the hunt for a dead Welsh king, supposedly hidden within the mountains. And the way that these books describe nature, I think, is one of the most stunning ways that I've ever seen it described. These books just kind of sprawl throughout the seasons, and I especially love the descriptions of autumn in this book. They're just amazing. This book is also very loosely dark academia, since parts of the book take place at this very prestigious private school. And I think one of the most standout things about this book is the writing. Maggie Stiefvater just has literally one of the most unique writing styles that I've ever read, and I always read all of her books. The characters in these books are just so dynamic and real and really stick with you after you've read them. Overall, I just think The Raven Boys is the perfect book series for autumn because of the way it combines dark academia, elements of fantastical nature, and the paranormal to create a beautiful and incredible tale that has become a favorite to myself as well as many others. The next book I want to share with you is The Idiot by Ilif Batuman. I do not know if I said that name correctly, but this book is another one of those books that I really wasn't sure about going in. However, one of my brilliant friends absolutely raved about this book, said it was her favorite book, and the way that she described it just compelled me to pick it up because I just simply had to know the story that she was describing to me. So The Idiot is very much one of those no plot, just character development kind of books, and this book really does go so deep into the thoughts and emotions of the single main character. This book takes place at Harvard and follows a first-year student, Celine, who is the daughter of Turkish immigrants. And this book took me a while to get through, but I think it's one of those very beautiful slices of life that I consumed through a period of time. And I think reading this book over the course of autumn would be just absolutely beautiful because I love the way that this book describes academia and the settings of academia. And this book also is so funny and offers such an incredible and poignant critique of academic structures as well, since we as the reader are allowed to question these academic institutions in the same way that the main character does. This book is such an incredible look at what it is like to be a woman in college, and because of that, this book is so dear to my heart. I would definitely describe this book as a portrait of a character. I love the way that this book explores such raw and honest emotions. And even though this book did take me quite a while to get through, I loved every moment of it, and I felt that I could just pick this up for 10 minutes at any given time and just be absolutely in awe of what I'm reading. So if you love literary fiction, this is one of the best literary fiction books that I've read in such a long time, and I think you would absolutely love reading it this autumn. Okay, oh my gosh, we have so many to talk about. Okay, so the next book that I want to share with you is a book I literally just finished a couple days ago, and that is O Caledonia by Elspeth Barker. This book follows the story of a young girl and her coming of age, but in a very unique way, as at the start of the book we find out that the main character Janet is murdered, but we don't know how or why. And so the story follows along her life from a young girl up into a young teenager. And the main character, Janet, she's described as being very introspective, misunderstood, is very fond of books and poetry, and just doesn't quite fit in with the people around her, which makes her experience of growing up quite sad and isolated from basically everybody around her, including her family. This book takes place in Scotland, and that is one of the things that I love about this book. The way that the landscape is described and the way that we see the moors and the castles and the sea through Janet's eyes are not just beautiful, but we see these places through the eyes of a misunderstood young girl. And so through her perspective, we see the way that these places have such a profound impact on her, which I think impacts the way that we see the imagery so profoundly. While reading this book, I felt like I was transported to Scotland, a lonely home with only animals in the moors for company. I just stumbled upon this book very randomly. I discovered it on Instagram actually, and the description very much intrigued me. And I'm so glad that I did pick it up because I ended up finding one of the most incredible and unique coming of age stories that I've ever read. Moving on, I want to talk about some more spooky books for fall. And to begin, I want to talk about a classic that I am in love with, and that is We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. Shirley Jackson is a classic author to read in fall, and for a good reason. Her character work is stunning, and the tale that she weaves throughout this book is incredible. And this book is not very long, so it is very easy to complete this book in the fall. I love reading dark and spooky books. I am personally not a fan of the horror genre, since my imagination just gets a little bit too carried away, but Shirley Jackson's novels never fail to make me feel incredibly spooked. If you decide to pick this one up, you can expect absolutely stunning language that just transports you into autumn. But this book is a really short and incredible read for autumn, and I would definitely recommend. So the next book that I want to discuss is The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. So this book is a murder mystery that takes place in the Middle Ages and is situated in a group of monks, and we follow a young detective as he tries to figure out the murders that are happening around this church. And honestly, this is one of the best murder mysteries that I have ever read. I don't usually go for mystery novels, but this one was really incredible. I picked this one up in a bookstore as the description just sounded incredible. And I often find that books set in the medieval era or the Middle Ages, I think, are perfect to read in the fall. And combining all of those elements with a murder mystery, I think makes this a really incredible book to read during the autumn time. For the last book that I want to share with you for this video is the collection of short fiction by Oscar Wilde. I will never stop talking about how much I love Oscar Wilde, and while a lot of people have read The Picture of Dorian Gray, I would 100% recommend to read his other fiction as well, and his writing skill translates so beautifully in his short stories as well. So if you love The Picture of Dorian Gray, I would absolutely recommend you read some stories from this. Some of my favorites are Lord Arthur Saville's Crime and The Canterville Ghost. These stories are so perfect for the fall time, as they all take place in Victorian London, and the settings are very dark, moody, and mysterious. And I would also recommend these stories for people who want to get into classics but find a lot of classics very intimidating. Oscar Wilde, his writing is so witty and funny, but also very accessible at times, and I think these stories are a really great example of that. And so those are all of my book recommendations for autumn. I hope in this video you found at least a few reads that you want to pick up for this autumn. I wholeheartedly adore all of these books, and I know that you will as well. I really want to start making more bookish videos on this channel, so if you enjoyed this video, please let me know, and I would love to make more videos about books for you all, since I am so passionate about literature and I want to share that here with all of you. I really just love making videos of me sitting down and talking with you all As much as I love my vlogs, I feel like these videos are just so much more personal and intimate. So I think you can definitely expect more videos like this from me in the future. So with that said, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed hearing me ramble about my favorite books. I hope you have an incredible October and autumn season, and I will see you in my next video.